On Wednesday, July 15th, Dr. Kevin Feeney of Trinity College gave a talk to members of the Humanist Association of Ireland on Zoom. His talk centred around the origins of religion and of complex societies, including the extent to which moralising gods, by which we mean gods that concern themselves with what humans do, seem to have evolved alongside increasingly large societies. Some of Kevin's research focuses on which came first, thereby causing the other. Did big societies lead to more moralising gods, or vice versa? Well, Kevin gave a 20-minute presentation, which was followed by an hour-long discussion amongst our members of the topics that were raised. But it also really broadened out into a very wide discussion, incorporating a lot of what goes on in our world today. Hopefully you find it interesting.
So just to say thank you very much for the invitation. I'm always very happy to talk about this topic because it's one I think is very interesting and combines all of my kind of interests in one kind of overview of data and culture and the big questions of human life. So can people see my screen? Have I successfully shared? Yeah. Okay. Great. So this talk it's a 20-minute introduction, and a lot of the papers and stuff have a lot of detail. So what I'm really trying to do is just give you an overview of the field and like some of the imports and what these approaches tell us about, the cultural evolution of religion. It's also about how to be unpopular with data, because looking through the lens of cultural evolution of religion upsets a lot of people, and particularly when you do it with large amounts of data. So, So just about me, a little bit of background. I'm actually currently a CEO of a technology company, which is spun out of Trinity College based on my research. I formerly was an academic and also an archaeologist and journalist in the distant past. But really, all my research is interested in complex systems and trying to use computational power to analyze and tame them. And human history is the great one of them all, trying to understand why things happened the way they did. So I'm one of the directors of the SESHAC Global History Databank, which is the kind of overarching project that unites a lot of the data-driven cultural evolution research. I did somehow end up having a whole bunch of papers in different disciplines through this work, including I actually did a computational analysis of the translations of Joyce. That's the type of thing I sometimes do. But really, I'm just the data guy. I'm interested in these questions, but I'm good at kind of using computational techniques to attack them and ask questions of them. But I'm not the person who comes up with the theories or anything like that. But I think this puts me in quite a good position because I just want to know what's true. I don't really have a horse in any of these races. So the context here is that cultural evolution, in the field of cultural evolution, we look at cultural traits through the same lens as biological evolution. A group has a cultural trait. If that cultural trait helps the group to survive and reproduce faster than the other guys, then they're going to be more of them in the future. And there's going to be more of that culture in the future. And this was a very kind of controversial idea in a lot of the sociobiology disputes of the 1970s about group selection versus selfish genes. But really, most of that was media argument, and it didn't really interrupt the scientific framework. Postmodernists and many humanities scholars do not like this evolutionary technique because it does allow you to apply mathematical logic to some historical, at least gives you a framework. And again, coming from my background as a computer scientist, I just don't get this. Evolution is just temporal logic. If a thing reproduces more, there's going to be more of it in the future. And that's what time gives us. So it's the one type of, certain rule that we just know. That's just how time works. It's whether we like it or not. So then, but also we have to self-reflect. The cultural evolution is itself, evolution society is itself a culture, and it has its gods. And Darwin, obviously on the right, and on the left we have David Sloan Wilson, he's quite a famous humanist and cultural evolutionist who runs the Evolution Institute. And the Cultural Evolution Society is an academic institute of many of the scholars who are involved in this. So through this lens, we just look at because we try and look at great sweeps of history. and great variation between different types of society. Religious ideas, some of them spread and some of them don't. And some of them spread for certain periods and then it will die out. And so the questions are like, what are the given traits of any religious culture that gave it relative advantages or disadvantages compared to the other guys that were in circulation? Why did some religions, flourish? And so a key kind of assumption in the whole cultural evolution, which I think is very germane to humanists, is we don't look at these ideas themselves. It's not necessarily that important how true they are. It's what effects they have in society. That's the important thing. But this analysis, like looking at contemporary religions, for example, under an anthropological lens like this, makes religious people uncomfortable. So it does. This is one way that this type of stuff makes you unpopular. And so the big questions that are addressed in cultural evolution studies, and these are increasingly becoming, big, big media splashes in terms of science, because people are being a bit, more and more convincing data-driven answers to these questions, which I'll go into. But some of them, why did human sacrifice evolve so many times independently as a religious idea, and why did it flourish, and why did it then die? It just completely died out at a certain stage. But it's a thing that people came up with independently, and it actually, I won't go into it now, but there's really good answers to that question due to certain social situations. This is an even bigger question that people have, and in fact, along with Oxford and University of Connecticut, this is one of the people who are funding a lot of this research at the moment on this exact question. So we experience a Z-curve of inequality in large scale historical time. Primates, like our most close primate ancestors, have a highly hierarchical alpha to eta social structure. Paleolithic forebears, the first time modern humans showed up, they were incredibly egalitarian. And then the first empires that showed up, they had god kings, mass slavery, and completely hierarchical. And then for the last, if you measure it, most things, then for the last 3,000, maybe 5,000 years, things are becoming more egalitarian, in the longue durée. So why do these things happen? And these are really big questions that you would think impossible to answer, but actually the amount of scholarship that has happened in so many different disciplines into the past, and the unbelievable tools that they can bring to look into the past. There are archaeologists who can look at a single piece of pollen and tell you what the population was like, plus or minus 50% within a century, anywhere in the world at this stage. This vast amount of human wealth is there. It's joining it up and trying to actually be able to answer these questions. It's the difficult things. So these are some of the kind of big characters. The two, Peter Church and Harvey Whitehouse in the middle, towards the middle, they were my co-authors, and they're also the directors of the Shell Project. And there's some other kind of reasonably famous now scholars. Walter Shadell, you will see he's in the New York Times all the time because he's a big scholar of social crisis and plagues and stuff like that. Ian Morris is a Stanford professor. He writes about why the West rules for now. Again, all just taking very cultural evolution, science, and data-driven approaches to answering big questions. So how does the whole thing work? So there are large international interdisciplinary research consortia involving probably, like the Seshat one is one of the biggest ones, but there's probably 5 or 6 of a kind of international scale that have a whole bunch of scholars who are trying to pick out all of the salient facts to be from all of these different disciplines and store them in vast data banks so we can do these type of comparative questions. This is incredibly intricate. And so I've sat through meetings in Oxford where you have 50 archaeologists in one room arguing for 3 days about how we're going to encode, some agricultural variable about ancient Egypt. The amount of work that goes into kind of making these things, removing cultural bias from them is enormous. It's very impressive. So, but once you get these type of data sets that have a lot of the cultural bias factored out, and you're just looking at things like scale and types of behaviors that are comparable, and various other demographic aspects, you can start to actually answer amazingly certain questions, things that you do not expect. There are just some simple things that jump out, like when you have one type of society that is like this, and the classic one is, a forager society or a Paleolithic, and a Neolithic society shows up. 50 years later, the Paleolithic society is not there, and so there's a whole bunch of things that are, that once you have a large amount of data, everything becomes very clear. It's not always that clear. And so this is the seshat, and this is just a shot from the website of the sampling of all the kind of different sites and sampling areas that we take data from to try and get like a fully global long scale comparisons. Okay, and so why this is kind of different than a lot, scholars of the world have always, asked these big type and speculated in these type of big questions. So there's like 300 theories that we have cataloged as to why Rome fell. It's more than that, it's 350 something. And that we have kind of cataloged as distinct. There's hundreds of theories about Bronze Age, Dark Ages, and whether it even existed. But actually being able to sum up the amount of evidence to kind of even ask, is this plausible, which is right, it's just so difficult, The modern guys, they use like technology like LiDAR, to detect archaeological epigenetics is very important in understanding how populations moved around and stuff. And so when I look at most of the theories that people put out, they're scholars, cherry picking what's most of interest to them. They're very rarely, actually really rigorously compare them against alternatives. But actually with enough data, and this is starting to be the case, that you can subject a lot of these questions to very data-driven approaches. And this is very effective at dismissing theories. Like, it's really difficult to come up with a theory that's effective over a long durée and across cultures, very easy to come up with something that sounds good in the short term. And subjected to lots of comparative analysis, it just doesn't make any sense. So this is another thing that makes you unpopular in this discipline. A lot of these theories are theories that people have built careers on, and they don't like, and it's upsetting to them when somebody, as they see it, debunks it. So this is the Nature paper, and basically that intro was to give a little of the cultural context to like really the big question that's been asked here. And this comes down to a very big and long-running debate in cultural anthropology. There are two, and current influential cultural anthropology, there's two important schools who have debated this. And this is all within the spectrum of cultural evolution. Like, it's not a religious argument. It's more of a scientific argument, but reputations and so on are bound up in it. And to kind of explain the two factions. So there's one faction who was actually on our side in this, which, what I mean in on our side, this is Dr. Harvey Whitehouse, the professor of cultural anthropology in Oxford, who's one of the seshat directors. So he one of his most influential theories is that there are two types of religion in world history, effectively two types, and one is doctrinal, and the other is fetishistic, or fetishistic is probably considered like a culturally inappropriate word. I can't remember the current word for it. Sorry, excuse me. I'm the computer guy. But it's basically the difference being that the whole point of doctrinal is its repetition and kind of frequent but low stimulation is the signature of a doctrinal religion. So Christian religions and these type of religions where you have a very frequent mass or a very frequent ritual like that, but that's very low stimulation, and they stand out against many religions where the characteristic practice is high intensity. So there might be an initiation ritual, which is terrifying, you must die or something like that. And the hypothesis here, and a lot of the anthropological studies will back this up, that these are profoundly different type of forms of religion that form different types of societies. And because basically one can much easier encompass scale, whereas the other has much better cohesion, and those give you different characteristics. So the theory is, coming from that camp, that the evolution, the question that people are trying to see, and this sudden curve that happens in the left-hand side is suddenly all social, about 2,500 years ago, or 3,000 years ago, suddenly the scale, what social complexity really measures scale, but it measures scale in all sorts of ways. It's like, how many levels of hierarchy did you have in your religious organization? How many did you have in your civil administration? How many people did you have? How many roads did you have? It's just a kind of aggregate measure of, social scale or sophistication. And so suddenly, basically, after having been quite stable for a very long time, or for, thousands of years type of scale since the Neolithic Revolution, it suddenly jumped up. Okay, and so the theory coming from the doctrinal people is humans developed this new form of religion that didn't involve such intense, cohesive based initiations and stuff like that, and that allowed human societies to grow. And the other camp is what we call here the moralising gods camp. The moralising gods camp, their hypothesis is that the development of modern moralizing gods, that as soon as societies had gods that had this moralizing component, because lots of gods, moralizing gods is a slightly problematic word, by the way, in my opinion. It's not clear enough. One of the problems of the social sciences, and even the more scientific ones, is they don't define their terms well enough for my liking. But the general idea is societies that adopted moralizing gods became more egalitarian and more cohesive because the rulers felt guilty for the supernatural. They would be punished if they weren't good. And this actually put a check on their abuses, and things like the god kings and all the sacrifices died out. And so these are big kind of factions that are quite important in like modern social sciences and anthropology on a global scale. These things have been debated in the pages of Nature and PNAS for decades, because they're big kind of questions. And so what we did was we took a data set involving all of human societies, like 3,000 I think societies between 10,000 BCE and the present. And we just measured, like we took proxies for as many things as possible. Like, what is a proxy? How do you know if a doctrinal ritual is happening? And you can find, it's amazing with the ingenuity of all these archaeologists, how you can find really good ways of measuring these things. Like just how many, communal houses did they have, and how comfortable were they relative to other houses, gives you a really good insight into certain things. But there's lots and lots of other things. What patterns of beliefs they had, what patterns of sacrifices, what was the most unpleasant social ritual they had, like huge numbers of kind of facts all aggregated together. And what we found, in fact, was, okay, so the thing we're trying to explain is, okay, we effectively found that really no societies ever kind of went through that scaling up factor. Anybody that didn't have a doctrinal ritual, they never got very big. So this is, it's not explanatory, but it's a necessary condition, effectively. And this is what this graph here is showing, is there's basically, this is the period here, which is like 1,500 years, in which we can detect the doctrinal religions happened at different parts of the world, aggregated across all world history and all the different societies through this. This is how common doctrinal religions were through this period. And effectively, we found like no situations when people did not have that kind of social form of religion, irrespective of content. Now, remember, this is not a thing that we even ask about, because there's so many different beliefs. Like, you're not going to waste your time asking which ones are true. It's just much more interesting to look at why these things and what attributes they give societies. And then the other one is the moralizing God. So we found, and this is like really, really convincing and has caused a huge argument. And people are still like writing diatribes to the editors of Nature about this, which is that moralizing gods never happened before the huge increase in social scale. So whenever society, they only arrived at moralizing gods afterwards. So the fact that causal explanation effectively is completely debunked by this, to my mind, like absolutely conclusively. Like people will argue about it and have made the careers about it, but what we can kind of, that to me is the most convincing thing I've ever seen to say, okay, well, that definitely causation happened the other way around. Like things grew and then they got moralizing gods. You just don't get such a clear line between a curve stopping, and we can see it here in the rates of change and how that just happened at a very specific time, and it did not happen during any of the periods when the moralizing gods were adopted, because the moralizing gods you're talking about really starting out with Zoroastrianism and Christianity and Buddhism and the modern global or universal religions, and so effectively what this study did, the really high level thing that to me is massively convincing, and it's always most convincing when you say that nobody actually had the right answer, is that doctrinal religions, that form of religion, like societies can't grow very big, and it's a natural thing that kind of lots of societies develop independently as they encounter the vicissitudes of surviving in a hostile world, and so nobody ever grows big if they don't get that. But at the same time, what it also shows is that actually is not important really in the growth, because lots of people get that and they don't grow or change very much for 1,000 years. It's not actually a condition. It's a necessary but not explanatory condition. So effectively, the study shows that like basically the debate, the raging debate that had happened for decades, they were, one side had less reason than the other for sure, and the side that was people I was associated with had more reason, but also it said, nah, that's not the right theory. That's not what happened. That's just another consequential thing. And to me, anyway, I mean, this is purely informal, and definitely should not and cannot and would not be quoted on it, because I'm the computer guy. But it's quite clear, and you see this everywhere. Like the religious ideas are not actually the important ones in the scaling. What happens here, and we actually, if is a society gets really, really big by conquest. You can imagine the Mongols being a classic example, or anybody, the Romans, anybody. It happens to them all. Once they suddenly get really big, they suddenly go, oh my God, our folk religions that are about the local mountain are no good at motivating these people. and so when the Mongols, they invade the Chinese and they have their own, what you might call pastoralist religions, which are really quite different in character. And that's fine as long as they're plundering and so on. But when they're trying to rule a mega empire, they need something that, that motivates the population, and they immediately adopt the one that was there before. So like, definitely it's the case, but it always happens as well. Like so there's a weird causation thing here. A doctrinal religion pattern is very necessary to get to a certain scale. The next thing that is important is being really good at conquering large amounts of people historically, because that's actually what we know that actually happens in most of those cases. But if you want to keep a large society together, you need a religious ideology or some type of, and in this sense, we would say China is it's just a red dynasty. It doesn't really matter what the content are. It's a national unifying ideology. It's got myths. It's got all these things. They're all all in the same ballpark in terms of the broad way we would kind of consider religion and ideology in these things. But as I say, it's a thing that the data would say that any conquering society, what you see in these slopes as well is societies there's also, because it's such an aggregation, there's lots of societies that conquered big areas and then just completely fell to pieces because they couldn't adapt their belief system to be able to incorporate much bigger populations. And the fact that when you have a much bigger population, slavery doesn't work so well as a motivating thing, particularly when your neighbors figure out how not to be slaves and to have a citizen army and invade you, then you're in trouble. Anyway, so that's everything. That's the introduction. And so, as I say, that's a kind of whistle-stop tour of all of human history and how everything happens in religion in my effort at 20 minutes. So hopefully, I've kind of got some of the really big, interesting ideas across. This is just some recommended reading about some of the more kind of popular stuff. Ian Morris, Why the West Rules Renown, an excellent kind of comparative look at different societies and it's like their pretensions to all be special, I would say. And The Great Leveler is a fantastic book by Walter Scheidel from Stanford, looking at what at the great incidents of crisis in society and the patterns that they have. And then Peter Turchin, who is the kind of founding father of cliodynamics, who looks at the big picture mathematics and who's the kind of one of the leading intellects probably of the whole discipline. And the last thing I should say is this is a profoundly kind of optimistic outlook, I think, from a humanist point of view, because what we're really saying is that the real challenge is how people cooperate on bigger scales over time, and they adopt ideas that help them to do that. And this, things can go backwards for sure, but like the broad sweep of human society is forward and towards more equality and more humanist type of, like, the answer to why human sacrifice died away is because people didn't like it. So anyway, so that's enough probably from me. So I'd be delighted to take people's questions. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thanks a million, Kevin. I actually made you host the meeting there so you could share.
Okay.
Would you mind making me host again?
Yes. How do I do this? This is a participants. Okay. David Murphy. Sorry. Okay. Make host. Yes. Okay. Success.
Thanks a million for that, Kevin. Fascinating stuff. Great food for thought. Kat, do you want to begin with Q&A?
Sorry. Can you hear me?
You can.
Great. I had to bypass being muted there. That was really interesting, Kevin. Thanks so much for that. I hope everybody enjoyed as much as I did. A topic I wasn't very familiar with beforehand, and great to have an insight into it. And certainly I'll be looking into the recommended reading as well. I can't see any questions in the chat at the moment. I'm not sure, Eamon, if you've got a different view to me. I'm working on an iPad, so it's not the easiest to navigate.
Oh, well, in that case, Teresa Graham has put a question there. Teresa, do you want to?
Yes, please, Kevin. I would like to know how you're defining culture. I know you're talking about complex societies, but is it just religion, or are we talking about language, literature, the things that we normally look on as culture?
Yeah, the whole package. Like I would, and in general in cultural evolution, we would take a very broad approach to what we consider culture. I mean, there's you can analyze society in terms of norms, and norms are a very large and important part of culture. What are the expected ways that people behave? And so, and then in terms of, like, there's always then people get into quite binary thinking, what's this culture or what's that culture? You can look at these things as like clusters of certain ideas. You don't have to kind of make it binary, as I say. There are certain, so you can look at the ancient Celtic culture. There's a big debate about whether the Celts were really a people and stuff. But really what you have is certain common cultural ideas that ran through Celtic society. So that's the important thing. It's not really whether this is a culture, that's a culture. It's like big, and these things all take different scales, you know, but there are very identifiable common patterns that, you know, change from one side of the road to the other sometimes.
Thank you.
That's great.
I might jump in there then.
Go ahead, Eamon.
Before anybody else puts their hand up. Kevin, you mentioned how sacrifice died out. I mean, I don't know if there's any more to it than that, or do you have anything, any more information on it? Would you care to expand on why it was that happened, or what actually was it about certain societies that is there any data to suggest what it was about certain societies that instituted sacrifice in the first place?
Yes, and you know, there are the graffiti of Babylon. Okay, the inscriptions that some of the early rulers of the Fertile Crescent left on their walls about like how they had sacrificed the entire population and stuff like that. So, so as soon as large societies show up in the historical record, basically the very first guys, the first thing they had to say to human history was, "I just butchered everybody here." That was literally the, you know, this, or what's his name, Akkad, Sargon of Akkad, you know, one of his first inscriptions in Ur. So this showed up as soon as we had large societies, and the explanation is actually pretty simple. It's that smaller kind of village level societies, the smaller you get and the closer you are to a Paleolithic band, the more cohesive you are. A group, there's a number called Dunbar's number, which is typically quoted as 142. And that's the maximum size that any human can know everybody else and everybody else's relationship to one another in a group. And that's the kind of most stable, you know, still is the most stable kind of size of a human group. Because if they stay together, they can become 100% cohesive because everybody knows everything. There's no secrets, and they kind of. But once you get beyond that, it's actually much harder. Okay, and the first thing that somebody figured out was how to, you know, get a group of warriors that were really good and conquer a much larger population. Okay, because people did not voluntarily give up their autonomy in their smaller groups, but except when they were conquered. And when people figured out how to do that, it turns out that cohesion is very important. But when it comes to war, it does not matter. Scale is all that matters. You can put, if you have 10 times more slaves and those guys have a tenth of the free guys, you just get your slaves to throw to fire arrows at them. There's a massively asymmetric advantage to scale in war. So the first guys that managed to kind of get up that scale where you're no longer in societies in thousands and 10,000s, they did it through pure conquest and slavery. And so human sacrifice was all about, these people are not actual humans. They are some type of terrible god from planet devil who've come to, and to try and reinforce that over people. The problem with that is it's very unstable because the population obviously hates it. And so as soon as somebody figured out how to do a slightly less autocratic thing, you know, that basically all the subjects fell to pieces. A really good example of that at play is the Spanish invasion of Mexico. Like the Spanish, they toppled the Aztec Empire without ever actually having a fight, because all of the Aztecs victims who were getting sacrificed, they just walked off straight away. You know, I mean, the Spanish obviously didn't turn out to be much better for them, but the thing just collapsed by itself. So that's the weird thing in cultural evolution. A thing will work for a while, but as soon as a different thing shows up next door, boom, gone.
Very interesting. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Kat, are you having trouble seeing the chat function? There's a question there from.
I just saw it there. There's a question from Bob. Are there any contemporary examples of an effective political system which is not tied to a moralizing God or use fear?
Well, mostly we try and stay away from kind of too much overt commentary on contemporary political situations, because that's easily, people definitely don't like to be powerful people, especially, compared to primitive societies and so on. So, like, what I would say is, like, actually the pandemic is a good thing. Crisis is a good way of testing these things. Crises basically, when you have economic crises, Warren Buffett said, it shows you which of the investors are bathing naked, because who's taking all these bets that they can't back up. It's the same with states and societies when crisis is hit. You can cover up a lot of stuff, a lot of weaknesses, underlying cohesive weaknesses, until the crisis hits. And so the people who are suffering and the people who are most cohesive at the moment are kind of exactly who you'd expect, from the characteristics that you need. Like the most important thing you would say in a long-term social health of a political system is that the leaders are true believers. It doesn't really matter. Again, that matters a hell of a lot more, because that means they self-sacrifice for the social system and they don't just give stuff to their pals and cronies. So, as I say, I wouldn't want to make any specific, because cultural evolution tends to operate on a larger scale, but typically things like how societies react to major pandemics and crises, because these happen all the time on this type of scale, is a really good measure as which social systems in which countries have kind of lost that ability to have a true believer in leadership.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question there, or make an observation about, as you brought up the pandemic? Because I've been looking at this. Isn't the pandemic an example of where science in most countries is triumphing over a moralizing God or a belief in religion? That most societies, not all, but most societies, are being guided by the science, and the politicians are taking note of the science in the main. Well, we'll exclude Mr. Trump, but in the main, that the science is becoming more powerful. So the medical power is increasing in society to the detriment or overpowering religion.
It definitely, I would, like when some things stay the same, some things definitely do not. Like, we have the most technocratically, scientifically dependent society nowadays, and we can't address these type of big crises and issues without thinking scientifically. It's another part of social evolution, that you have to face up to the realities of certain things. Like climate change is a great one. Like, there's a big this crisis to me is only a small foreshadow of the type of social crisis that we just know is going to happen with climate change. And wishful thinking gets you nowhere in these. Like, pandemic doesn't care, or climate change doesn't care. So yes, I mean, it's not only is it going forward, but it needs to happen quicker, because there's 8 billion of us on the planet, and we don't want to take another dark ages, because dark ages happen historically as well. Everything isn't always forwards. That's the overall trend, but things do go backwards for long periods of time. So, like, I think yes, but not enough. Like, I mean, the good thing that I would hope would come out of the pandemic is more awareness of this stuff that the scientists are saying about climate change is going to be really serious and bad. And pandemics are nothing compared to that, because it's not going to go away after a few years. So yeah, I mean, I think it's for humanity. It's a really important that we actually gain the ability to think more scientifically about these problems, and do not go for wishful thinking, and don't believe the scientists. It won't happen.
Thanks, Kevin and Teresa. We have another question here from Dara. He says, Kevin, am I correct in holding that there's an inverse correlation between levels of education and commitment to religion? I.e., is it clear that better educated populations less likely to adhere to religion and or superstitions?
It depends. Like, you can have extremely well-educated religious systems, and a lot of the religious systems historically have all been about literacy, you know. So, but there's, what you can say for certain is there's strong correlations between intelligence and scientific and lack of religious belief. We know that. But at the same time, there's strong correlations between intelligence, alcohol abuse, and intelligence and drug abuse. And actually, it turns out that there's strong correlations between intelligence and any non-traditional behavior, because intelligence is mostly correlated with coming up with new solutions and not just copying everybody else. And so it fans out in all sorts of ways. So actually, as I say, like, I find, I'm not a believer in religious in religion at all. It's not kind of in my frame, but I sometimes think atheists, especially the kind of new Dawkins atheists, are too hard on religious people, because a lot of what religion, you know, gives people is social aspects of social care and community gathering, that without and that's the important thing. The beliefs aren't actually that important. I always say actually about Irish Catholics, you know, Irish Catholics, I never heard of an Irish Catholic reading the Bible much. It's not the beliefs is important. It's the
Thanks, Kevin. Thank you.
And we have another question there from Alan. So, does human sacrifice not merely manifest itself in contemporary political forms such as biopolitics and necropolitics? In other words, did the concept of human sacrifice merely evolve as opposed to disappearing altogether?
Wow. I hope it's quite disappeared. I hope there's not much of it going on, not that I'm aware of anyway, but it certainly doesn't play the same huge role it played as an ideological form. Like, Aztec society was all about getting 100, children on top of a pyramid for everybody to see and killing them in front of everybody. You know, it's just a huge aspect. And things never go away, because it's not the human sacrifice that's the important thing. It's a display of dominance and fear. And that is still, humans are still primates. Intelligence and all of the social aspects are one important part of life, but still, that's an important aspect. Like, the primate in people, and dominance is still a thing that humans try to do to other people. And, the greatest example of this is Donald Trump. I don't know if probably people here are great fans of Donald Trump, but in many ways he's a very embarrassing man. But the one thing that he does while he's there is because he gets dominance. He can walk into a room like he's in a dressing room playing football and bully the nerdy kids. That's what he knows how to do. And so those type of instincts and the importance of kind of showing dominance and power, those things never go away. But we do not allow, thank God, Donald Trump to sacrifice hundreds of children to demonstrate it anymore. The population wouldn't take it.
That's great. I don't see any other questions in the chat.
I think there was one from Alan there, Alan G, as opposed to Alan T. Alan, you can unmute your microphone if you want to ask the question yourself.
I think you just answered my question there. It was about human sacrifice, and you answered it very well. I didn't really have much more on that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. To me, that's the the big takeaway. Like, human impulses, people are people, societies are societies. They deal with lots of problems, and they have the same impulses, but the social context changes and doesn't allow people to, and forces them into certain ways. And a lot of the evolution of religious beliefs, if you just look at it like that, everything kind of makes sense.
Sheila has her hand up there.
Yeah.
Hi there. Thanks, Kevin. This has been really interesting, and the conversation to follow has been really enjoyable. I'm wondering if you're in a position. So you're talking about cultural evolution, and what you're doing is analyzing patterns of behaviors, if that's the right way to capture it.
Yeah.
Are you in a position to look at future behaviors to see what are the patterns that are emerging now, and can you make any predictions?
Yes, unfortunately so. And the reason I say unfortunately so is because there's a certain kind of meta cycle called structural demographic theory that looks at social kind of conflicts over 300-year periods and basically identifies these patterns. And in 2010, Peter Turchin, who's one of the co-authors, so he published this prediction and said, look, all the indicators are 2020 in the United States is going to be a complete catastrophe. It's just going to go through the roof in terms of social instability. And so he published that in 2010. And so that was the one. And I remember when we were talking about that, we did not expect it to be nearly as true as it turns out to be, let me tell you that much. and he's now getting quite a bit of he's in the New York Times and stuff all the time because of that. So definitely, yes, we have. And some of it has been kind of scarily predictive. As I say, but yes, all of, to me and to, in fact, all the people I work with as well, we'd all say that climate change is the big threat, though, because when climate crises coincide with social instability, real trouble hits. That's when things go really bad. Because in history, this has happened many, many times. Like, we're actually being funded by the U.S. Army at the moment to do a study of the Proto-Krakatoa event in 532 BC, when there was a kind of nuclear winter across a lot of Europe, and a lot of societies, wars broke out, and certain societies came out stronger, and lots of other guys died out. So they're trying to figure out whether they need to send the tanks into Florida or something like that. I don't know.
Can you make predictions of what kind of societies can weather that type of a crisis? Or a couple of characteristics, not putting to you. I would say a couple of key characteristics of a resilient society. I know it's kind of going back to your talk, but
and this is kind of stuff that we're only publishing now at the moment, the results of this, but it's social cohesion. It's anything that indicates social cohesion and closeness and rampant inequality is the dead giveaway of guys that are in trouble, because and those things can topple incredibly easily because somebody invades and they're all fighting each other because they've got these long-standing hatreds. And certainly you can see that in the United States. You've got a situation where economic inequality, people living right next door to each other, being very poor and very rich, or very poor and violent, and very rich and not violent at all. And you can see that the elite as well, like another big predictor of these troubles is what they call elite over competition. So you get three generations of elite after. Typically you get a big crisis, like a big war of a society, and the people who get that disciplines the leadership more than anything else, because they kind of go, oh God, if we don't pull together, we lose everything. So in the United States in World War II, you had tax rates of like 98% and stuff like that, and this happens with every historical society. 3 generations in, after they become a world empire, everybody gets super complacent, and particularly the elite, they just start filling their own pockets and not caring about the goose that laid the golden egg anymore. And so if you look at the United States, the system in the 1930s, like Donald Trump never would have got anywhere close to ever being allowed into the room, because he would have been frozen out by all the old wasps. You wouldn't have done business with him. There's a whole disciplinary framework that FDR and people had. That was the whole. It wasn't like super egalitarian or everything, but it was just you can't just put an idiot in that position. And societies regularly lose that. Rome had their Caligulas and so on, and they get complacent, and it's literally like clockwork. 3 generations of prosperity after a big crisis when they've kind of stepped up in power in the world.
You can see that making sense with the golden egg. So the first generation created the golden egg, worked hard for the golden egg. The second generation saw that work happening and maybe contributed to the work.
Yeah.
And the third generation is just reaping the benefits, those legacy children who have all the doors open for them but never had to work for them. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So we were doing a game about, or not a game, sorry, I shouldn't say it, it's serious, but a prediction competition between ourselves as to, you know, how well societies would cope with the pandemic. And the 2 really big factors are complacency, which is how many years since your society has had a major crisis. And so you saw all the Eastern European countries, and as predicted, did really, really well because they had a big, you know, social crisis in the 1990s that their societies fell to pieces, and so they took it super serious. Whereas even like if you look at the Germans, they did they're quite a cohesive society, but they're quite complacent. You know, they hadn't. It would have been the Second World War since anything bad had happened there. So they, even compared to their Eastern European neighbors, they acted much slower. And the further you got, you know, once you got to the United States, which has been, you know, United States, even though they had the Second World War, it's really the Indian Wars since you had, or the British War of Revolution, or the Civil War, in fact, since you had a real internal war there. And so, yeah, enough generations of kind of prosperity and complacency, people treat it like oxygen, and they'll happily kill that golden goose.
Great. We have another question popped in there from Stephanie. Do you think that social instability can be a foundational block to shifting a culture in a different direction, i.e. norms, beliefs, politics, etc.?
Yes, absolutely. You know, I mean, social instability only happens because right-thinking people can no longer tolerate the way things are. They're just like, I can't put up with this. I can't, you know, that's what causes social instability. So, you know, and social instability is necessary to change entrenched social systems that no longer work. You know, that happens all the time. Like a good kind of example that you can use is 19th century Russia. So in Tsarist Russia, the Russia of Anton Chekhov and Tolstoy and all these, no right-thinking person of the middle class could possibly back the regime. And so all the, you know, Lenin and Trotsky, these were all lawyers and children of minor aristocracy who were just like, this system no longer works. And you can see that, for example, in, you know, the United States had been building up to bursting points. The reason we were able to predict, incidentally, those absurdities, because the signs are everywhere. If you look at things like the amount of rampages with guns, they literally just been going like that. There's huge predictors that are as predictive today as they ever were.
Okay, great. I'm not sure if there's any more questions on your side, Eamon.
I don't see anybody with their hand in the air. Oh, Elaine.
What can we do?
So a lot of these, this is a question I asked myself, and one of the scary things is about a lot of this stuff is there's such large and difficult situations to deal with, because they, particularly things that happen over generations, like that kind of flow towards people being more complacent. And it's very difficult to get people to change if they don't, you know, to something that their complacency by definition means you're not worried about stuff. You take stuff for granted that more so than you should. And so, but at the same time, the reality is humans never had this ability to look into the past and figure this stuff out before. Everybody else had to go into this stuff blind, and people have gone through stuff and come out of it actually managed to come through big crises and come out with much nicer and more civilized societies. Like all those God King guys with human sacrifice, they got cleaned away by societies that were much more pleasant. I mean, there was lots of trauma and stuff like that. And so these things, looking at the big picture stuff, humans keep getting better at understanding the world. We can actually look back and understand this. And so we never could do this before. It was impossible to even imagine addressing problems before you could even see them. So we have to be optimistic, and we have to hope, that we can, that science and reason and understanding and that type of way of looking at the world can help us to avoid some of the cataclysms that people have been unable to avoid in the past.
But what do we do?
What
What do we? This has so gone beyond what I would have even imagined this evening to be, and for somebody who can encapsulate human history in such a in an hour, and you've done it, and you have done it, and you have done it so beautifully. But what do we do? How do we help?
No pressure there at all, Kevin.
I know.
Yeah, it's a difficult question, as I say, and I fully, I say I do not have a past answer to it. All I would say is that everybody who cares about the world should, care about the maintenance of large-scale civilization and the fundamental idea that humans can group together in bigger and bigger groups and figure out a way of getting along that's not completely intolerable to people, because that's the way things get better, and that's the way we get through bumps. So like the exact way of doing that at any particular time is never obvious, and some of this stuff is unpalatable. At any particular time the other guys seem like the worst guys in the world, but oftentimes it's not necessary, and sometimes you can't help it, but it's conflict, rather than trying to find that transcendent, how do we actually reform cooperation at a higher level rather than focusing on the immediate kind of wars, because that's the only way you get through them, is by kind of coming up with a higher level idea of, how we can have unity and cohesion, internationally, across political factions, across belief systems. That's the only way you get through that conflict.
But even to bring it to a more immediate level of those of us who are doing this pandemic or whatever we want to call it with ease, and those of us who are doing it with extreme difficulty.
Yeah.
It's the inequality, isn't it? And it's I would imagine that we, and certainly I can only speak for myself, we're in a privileged position where we can even be on this platform talking to these people who share so much in common, but there are so many people who don't have what we have. And it's the inequality that I always see, and it's the trying to reconcile what I could do with what I do. And bringing it back to my personal responsibility for myself, for everybody I know, for every human person, for the planet. It's my responsibility. And I suppose what I bring it back to is in terms of what I can do to be my life, somebody else's life. And I do try to do these things. And I think part of is being the human person. There no God, no benign father, no all-seeing, none of that. What can I actually do to make my life better, to make the life of the person beside me, the life of the person I don't know, the life of the person on the other side of the planet, and the planet? And I suppose I just keep getting caught up in the nitty-gritties and the small things, and it's the small things that keep sort of throwing me asunder. And if I can keep, and listening to you has just been so important, actually, because I get so caught up in, the coronavirus numbers for this evening. even though I don't watch TV, somebody tells me. And you know, there is so much genuine hardship. There are so many people who are genuinely struggling. It's that how can I have some kind of meaningful impact without it costing me my human sacrifice, I suppose, is what I'm asking. And maybe that's an unrealistic question. And you know, listening to you, and you're so informed, and you're going from the ancient past, you're talking about archaeology, you're talking about 5,000 years in which we can look at what's happened in our society on this tiny island, and looking at that in terms of how it impacts on people now. But going forward, how do we help? How do we make something better?
Yes, I mean, but to some extent, your question is my question, and my answer is I want to understand stuff as much as possible. I just want to know why these things happen, and the more I understand, the more I can answer that question about myself. And I think another very valuable thing from a large scale historical review is people always, everybody, every single individual, a human characteristic is vanity about our own importance. You know, we are just, there's so many people historically and stuff, and so we put too much weight upon what we can achieve ourselves, you know, as an individual. And the reality is it's an accumulation of the actions of billions that changes things. It doesn't, you know, individuals can be outstanding and stuff like that. So like all that, you know, my only ambition for myself is to understand stuff so I can help myself to answer that question better, because it's not obvious, you know, things are unfortunately complicated. And if there was, I mean, if there was a kind of shining insight that you could say, now we have to break through and we follow this would be great, but I've never found it yet. You know, everything is quite subtle. And I before I went into this specific field of research, like all my ideas were completely different. I had a lot of wishful thinking ideas, like just things that I really feel that's valuable, because I think now I have a better idea of actually what is a realistic and useful way of setting my own goals. So I don't have these aspirations that I should be able to achieve things that I think are now impossible, you know? So and to some extent that is life. That's the struggle. How do we answer that question? Oh my God. Especially when things change or in a pandemic, and suddenly a whole lot of things that were routine are no longer routine, and you're actually asking yourself, what the hell do I do today? You know, I think lots of people, you know, it's been quite a social shock for all sorts of people, and ways of living. Like nobody knows how society is going to settle back, even in the short to medium term, with everything working quite differently and huge unemployment and stuff like that. It's like quite a mystery.
The tough questions, Kevin.
Yeah.
I hope you don't mind taking a couple more. I'd see.
No, I'm quite happy.
Their hands in the air. Jennifer Sturgeon, you're the first person I saw, and then we'll go to Tom White. And I know Bob McLaughlin, you have another question in the chat as well. We let you unmute after Jennifer and Tom, and you can ask the question yourself.
I just have an observation, and unfortunately it's perhaps a pessimistic one. But even though, as you've pointed out, our current society, we now have the ability to have greater knowledge and understanding of former civilizations. And yet, despite all of that, despite our knowledge of history, we seem to make the same mistakes over and over again. And, you know, we haven't stopped war, we haven't stopped famine. We still fight with our neighbours. You know, there's still sectarian strife in different parts of the world. We don't seem to have learned from history. And I'm wondering, why is that? Is it because basically human beings are mostly selfish? I'm sorry to be pessimistic, but it's something that concerns me, that we don't seem to have learned from history and repeat mistakes again and again.
I think actually there's a curious aspect of human culture and how human memory works that actually means that means we're particularly susceptible, and we can never get over that one. And this is the idea that humans as a really general purpose intelligence, your whole thing you do with your brain is to try and figure out which things never change. And so you're 3 or 4 generations into a life that, you know, it's always been prosperous and stuff like that. And that just becomes like oxygen. It's not a thing that even you notice anymore. And it's actually how humans like are so adaptable to their environments. You know, they end up on top of a mountain. You come back to them 30 years later, they know nothing but mountains. You know, people can adapt whole cultures to stuff. So, but humans collectively, as a group, humans individually don't, but humans collectively do. Like, there's always, as I say, it's always easy to be pessimistic about the moment in our crisis, but we have to remember, for the last like 50 years, it's been possible to, you know, walk probably from one side of the world to the other with no real physical threat to yourself, you know, other than dying of being too tired. You could literally, I've been all over the world. I consider myself the most privileged person in the world to have lived in a period when you could go anywhere. You probably weren't going to get, you know, enslaved, which is, you know, true for most of human history. So we're not perfect, and we have these inbuilt kind of characteristics which are hard to do with. But as a group, we can kind of learn things and manage to, you know, slowly drag ourselves up and be more civilized and get rid of the more horrible parts, like the human sacrifices and stuff like that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kevin. The question maybe the answer to Elaine's question is human kindness. That is one thing that we could all do within our society to try and make things better, and it will make things better. Could I ask Kevin, do you think that human kindness is evolving and becoming a more powerful force within society generally? Can that be proved from your data?
I would say no. And I would say like human kindness is just a constant. I mean, like you read back to the Greeks or the Romans, like those guys felt really bad about having slaves, and they got really friendly with their slaves, and they felt terrible. And then, you know, by Roman times, their slaves were kind of free, all the urban ones. People, if you put people in, you know, beside other people, they're going to feel sorry for them. Humans have this empathy thing. They have not got ways of getting rid of it, and sometimes their societies depend upon it. But it's like, you know, it's just a force of nature. Like humans do not like having to be exposed to the suffering of others habitually. You know, you get some weird societies sometimes on the edge of empires with weird dead cult stuff, but they're very exceptional. Like that's humans. Human kindness like transcends all those barriers really quick.
Thanks, Kevin. Bob, I think you're next. Do you want to ask your question about Steven Pinker?
Sure. It's just, I think you know Steven Pinker, a psycholinguist out of Harvard. His most recent book, maybe 2 years ago, Enlightenment Now, he went through one area after another using high statistical sources, showing that in general, the world has never been better than it is now.
Yeah.
All those things, and with the exception of the environment. And I was just wondering whether you agreed on that.
Yes, and to some extent, like I think he paints way too rosy a picture, and he's kind of a little bit guilty of cherry picking. Like this is better angels of our nature. And there has been like a big controversy between him and Nicholas Taleb about the statistical attacks on it. And so I've kind of looked at that a little bit. And so I always find Steven Pinker, he's a little bit too kind of, he's quite a media star at the moment. So he does tend to paint a more uniform picture, shall I say, than I think the evidence supports. But I do think there's something to what he says, okay? People underestimate the frequency with which different societies massacred each other historically. And how much more dangerous, and how it's just because societies and people's consideration of who we are was much smaller. So I do think there's something to it, but I do, you know, I have looked a little bit into that controversy, and I do think Taleb has got something about it. So,
Thank you.
Good.
Francesca, you're next. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Thank you. Kevin, I have a two-part question I'd like to ask you. The first part is, do you think, say people that are living in the rainforest or very underdeveloped place or in isolation, do you think the isolation makes them more prone to be dependent on superstition, etc., and appeasement? That's the first question. And the second question, I want to know your view on the American Indians who are always talking about Mother Earth, sister, sun, brother, whatever. Do you consider those God replacement things, or how would you categorize that expression?
Okay, so I have a good answer for the second part, which I'll do first. So we would categorize the American Indian religions as like a classic pastoralist religion. You look at, you know, there's been lots and lots of societies that have basically, you know, followed buffalo or lived in Great Plains societies, and they all tend to have those type of religion and nothing to do with property ownership, because it's not really a concept in those type of societies. So those type of religions are an expression of the type of beliefs that are really important for people who live in those societies. Like, what is important is the changing of the seasons, and so that's the whole belief system falls around that. It doesn't really have, you know, the Abrahamic religions evolved in the very same place as, you know, the first farmers evolved, which is completely different, and so have completely different characteristics. It's about, you know, harvesting my little plot and we never move, and therefore property becomes more important and stuff like that. So that's like an absolutely you know, a really distinct type of way that belief systems. And so for us, yes, that's culture and religion. It doesn't matter that there's gods. It's the kind of organizing ideas for people. And I've forgotten the first part of the question, so could you just remind me?
Sorry. Well, first I want to see if I understand your answer to the second question.
Yeah.
Do I hear you saying that they would be considered a pasteurized religion, but a religion?
Or a pastoralist belief system. Like, again, it's a culture and a system of beliefs about the supernatural. So I don't really necessarily, when I look at these things, the presence of a, you know, moralizing God is just one type of religion. You know, there's lots of, most of the, oh yeah, it was about, for example, the tribes. So I have quite some experience in Central Africa, for example. And you get lots of like remnant pygmy populations there as well. These people have belief systems that are really very, very good for survival as a small group, and their isolation just means they haven't been conquered by the farmers, because farmers always conquer foragers, because they just have greater population density and, you know, per square hectare. So yeah, so there is so both of those situations are, you know, all from our point of view, it's like the beliefs of the supernatural are dependent on your way of life. You know, they help you to survive in your environment. So the environment can change, and it can no longer work, like for the American Indians and for a lot of those foraging tribes in rainforests. They run up against farmers or colonizers, and they have no chance.
Right. Now, the first question was, do you find that people who are living in so-called isolation, like in the rainforest, is the isolation, what percentage would you say the isolation has to do with the supplanting that with some sort of religious, ethnic superstitions?
I don't think it's important. That's the important thing there at all. It's like, if you went back 10,000 years, everybody lived in those small type of bands. It's just that, and people didn't voluntarily change by and large. Somebody figured out how to conquer the other ones, and things stepped up that way a lot of the time. So the whole world's center of rainforests and the top of mountains are full of essentially groups and cultures that were wiped out in the rest of the world and could only kind of hang out in small redoubts. And it's really just the isolation means that nobody's conquered them yet. If you look at Brazil, there's still a constant war between, you know, farmers who are chopping down the rainforest and indigenous tribes, because farmers and, you know, farmers want to cattle and grow stuff, and these guys want rainforests.
Right. Thank you, Kevin. Very good answers. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think we just looking at the time, we'll take one final question. I think Sheila has a question.
If somebody else has a question, it was more a comment. So if somebody has a pressing question, I don't mind giving way.
No, work away.
Okay. When I'm similar to Tom, when Elaine was talking, I was thinking, Tom said kindness. I was thinking about care. And, you know, I think, Elaine, you're halfway there already, that you obviously care. So what Kevin is saying is that resilient societies are ones that, you know, have less socioeconomic stratification or greater social cohesion. And, you know, we can find ways to bring about change in our own local communities. And though Kevin also was saying it's more of a macro issue, that, you know, the macro behaviors or the macro patterns are the ones that are really important, but those macro patterns are made up of lots of small micro patterns. In my own work, I'm interested in the ethic of care as a concept, and it's about it's kind of a response to that ethic of justice around individualism and justice, and it's more about being relational and being in relationships and valuing relationships. So, you know, with your neighbors, with, you know, there's lots of things I think we can do to work towards greater cohesion in our society and bringing about change locally, and just creating those relationships based on care and based on opening up to people. And you know, I think I like to think that can help in some ways to creating a more resilient society. Maybe I'm a bit Pollyanna in my outlook.
That's great. Thank you, Sheila. So just I want to say a big thank you to Kevin and for your presentation, and also for your involvement with the discussion just now. I think everybody's really enjoyed the whole evening altogether. And we hope that we can invite you back in the future for another round.
Indeed. In happier times when we can enjoy a drink together.
In real life, hopefully.
Yes, exactly.
And a big thank you to everybody for joining us this evening and for your input into the conversation. So just a big round of applause then for Kevin.
Thank you very much, everyone. It was a real pleasure, and thank you for the interested questions. As I say, I really like this is my professional work, but this is really my hobby. I love this stuff, so I'm delighted always to, you know, when people are interested, if I can present some of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you.